My name's Marshall Myers. I am 27 years old. I started writing in high school, and now I'm a professional author. I have CP, which means I can't walk and I use a wheelchair. Well, it's affected pretty much everything about my writing. I write my characters being able to do things that I can't do so that I can do that sort of through my characters, and I can ask questions that I wanted to ask, like God or my parents or people that I've met that I can't ask them. And I can basically do anything. I can go anywhere in the universe. Started writing when I was in high school to deal with the unpleasant pressures of being in high school, and I used dictation software to write my novels. I've written 4 novels and a book of short stories, and I'm currently slowly working on another one. I have a dictation software called Dragon Naturally Speaking. It's one of the most powerful dictation softwares on the market. It basically, the microphone listens to me while I speak, and then a couple seconds later it writes down what I say. Well, I just said it before, I get to have the adventures that I never could have. Like when I was a kid, I always wanted to go off and learn how to sword fight. I wanted to go and learn how to take karate and stuff like that, and I get to do all that through my characters now. I discovered that one of my favorite mentors, even though I haven't met him, R.A. Salvatore, says, if you can quit writing, quit writing. If not, I consider you an author. So just write, just write. You know, it might not be the best thing that you've written all year or all day, but just write, just get it on paper. I like to volunteer. I really enjoy working at the George Center for Music Therapy. It's become like a second home to me, and they're all like my family. You guys are all my family, spiritually and emotionally speaking. And I really would think the books were the way I used to find what was special about me and show people what was special about me. But now I think this is my favorite thing about me. Hello, my name is Marshall Myers. I am 27 years old. I have spastic diplegia cerebral palsy. Hello, my name is Marshall Myers. I am 27 years old. I have spastic diplegia cerebral palsy, and I am a regular assistant at the George Center for Music Therapy, one of their regular volunteers. And a lot of people that come here don't really know this about me, but the George Center, in a nutshell, saved my life, because in the summer of 2013, I was so depressed. I was going through a time of spiritual and emotional transition with me and my family, and they just came in and rescued me, because I felt like I didn't belong in many of the social situations that I found myself in. I felt like I didn't belong and that I didn't fit in or anything like that. And I went to one of the few places that I did feel like I belonged, which was the Rutledge location of Camp Infinity at Camp Twin Lakes. And they were there doing, Andrew Littlefield, who is no longer with the company, and Jamie George were doing the music time for the sessions of camp. And I have been a novelist for many years. I had recently stopped writing for a long period of time, and that led into my depression as well. But I had a card telling everybody about my books, and I had one left, and I gave it to Andrew, and he said, cool, I'm gonna have the George Center follow you. And they started following me on Twitter, and I started following them on Twitter and Facebook, and I was just captivated. Now let me say, I was just captivated by both Andrew's amazing saxophone skills and Jamie's angelic voice. Nobody can carry a note like that woman can. And I was like, I want to see more of your music. I want to have you listen to your music and stuff like that. So I went away from on a vacation, and I came back, and in that month I lost my cousin and a very good friend of mine, in the same month. And right around that time, Jamie emailed me because I had sent her a sympathy card and a book for a consolation present for the death of one of her relatives. And she said, "We would really love for you to come and work at the George Center this year." And I was at first I was kind of unsure about it, but then right when I came there, I was just at home, right at home, and I knew that I belonged there because I felt very much like Jean Valjean in Les Mis, whose heart had he had been through so much toil that his heart had been seared with a brand of cynicism and stuff like that. And so I honestly felt like there were no truly selfless people in the world anymore. And the George Center proved me wrong. And they opened up my heart again. And I feel like I can even go back to those old social clubs that I used to be part of, and that I can forgive the people that have made me feel bad, because I know that the George Center has opened up my heart, and they really like the one. I have what I like to call an overactive guilt complex, where I feel extremely self-conscious and I'm afraid of making faux pas constantly. And the one time that Jamie kind of hurt my feelings was when she was just upfront and honest with me. She was like, "Marshall, why do you keep apologizing for every little thing you do? You didn't do anything. Why do you keep on doing that?" And I was just about to go to bed a few weeks ago, and I was thinking about that time, and I was like, you know what? She's absolutely right. For years, ever since I was a young teenager, I've been so socially self-conscious and so reserved, in a sense, that I was afraid to be myself. And at the George Center, I'm not afraid to be myself. And the last thing I want to say is this: at one session in at one session in camp, there was this kid on the autism spectrum who was having trouble acting out and stuff like that, and Jamie had to be kind of like Mrs. Mom and kind of both sweet and firm hand him into a place of obedience and stuff like that. And that reminded me of a song by Kate Rusby that goes, "There was a boy, a bitter boy, whose golden heart I saw gleaming. I thought I'd win the heart within, but now I know that I was dreaming." So I sent her the YouTube link to that song and said, "This reminds me of so-and-so and you." And she said, "Oh, thank you, that's very sweet." But then I started thinking about it. That bitter boy was me. And that bitter boy that felt that he didn't belong there and he closed his heart to the world was me. And Jamie and Lindsay and all the people that I met at Camp Infinity have helped open up my heart again, and I'm no longer bitter. And I know for a fact that I am more than ordinary, because ordinary is just a universal cultural myth.
Welcome to the George Center. Today we are talking with our friend Marshall Myers. Marshall, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am 27 years old. I have spastic diplegic cerebral palsy. Since graduating high school in 2008, I have written 5 books, 4 novels and 1 book of short stories, and essays and things like that, and I love volunteering here at the George Center. You're all like family to me.
As a volunteer at the George Center, I know in talking with you outside of this interview, you have mentioned that being a volunteer has really helped you find your purpose. What do you think your purpose is?
Well, if I may speak freely, the purpose of men, according to the Westminster Catechism, is to glorify God by enjoying Him eternally, and by helping these kids out here, I can enjoy my purpose of serving fellow man, and by that, serving my Creator.
How has being a volunteer at the George Center helped you find that purpose?
For many years, I just identified myself as an author. That's what I did. That's what I was. I was just an author and nothing more. And I sold books and gave away books and tried to get on the New York Times bestseller list. But since coming to the George Center and volunteering at other places like the George Center, I've come to realize that my purpose is much bigger than that. My purpose is to minister to people's hearts, and I can do that through my actions as well as the written word.
Working as a volunteer, I know you've worked with our bucket drumming group, and you've worked with our Any Dream Would Do, our performing arts group. What have you learned in volunteering about yourself, the kids, and the special needs community?
I have learned about myself that I'm not alone, that there are lots of people in my area of the special needs community that are much like me. They may have different diagnoses, but they're a lot like me. And I have learned, reinforced to my mind, that what C.S. Lewis says is true. You have never met a single person, no matter what their walk of life may be, that did not have a soul. And we all have a soul, we all have a spirit, and we all need love.
What has been your most meaningful experience as a volunteer?
Well, I have seen that, leading into the next question probably here, I have seen that a lot of people have emotional problems here that they try to deal with, and I was reminded of a song by Kate Rusby called Bitter Boy, which goes, "There was a bitter boy, whose golden heart I saw gleaming," and I thought that many of the people here that dealt with behavioral problems were bitter, but really, leading into the next question, that bitter boy was me. It wasn't them, it was me. And this working here cured me of my bitterness and my hate.
That's really great to hear. So, as you said, leading into the next question, you have experienced some difficulties with dealing with depression. So, I want to know how the music and volunteering at the George Center and places like the George Center have helped you to overcome your depression.
Well, partially I was depressed because I was going through a time in my life where me and my parents were in a time of transition. And during that time, all the places that I used to go for camaraderie and stuff like that, I felt like I no longer belonged there. And I felt like I belong here. And it's not necessarily the music itself, because some of the stuff we do is kind of kiddish and silly here, but it's not the spirit, it's not the music itself, it's the spirit behind the music. I truly believe that God used music to create the world. He sang the world into existence in Genesis, and that's why music has the power of creation, and it also has the power to heal, and your music has healed me.
Do you have a song maybe that speaks to you in relation to your depression? Maybe you can just share the title and the artist.
Well, there are two things that deal with me and my depression here, and that's also that song I mentioned earlier by Kate Rusby. Also the song Shoheen, which is, it's Scoticized English, but it's actually Gaelic for the term peace. Shoheen means peace in Gaelic. And it's like, why has my angel gone from me? The moon I fear and the stars fall on me, and stuff like that. And then it goes on, said, my angel is near to me, the moon I do not fear, and the stars shine on me. And you guys have really been my angels in the sense of stars and angels. You have been my angels in that you have brought spiritual healing to my life, and I'm forever grateful to you.
What are your recommendations for others who are dealing with depression?
Get outside your mind, do something, because you see, for me, the George Center is a job and it's a social experience, but also it's a spiritual exercise. And whether that be meditation on scripture, reading positive quotes, stuff like that. Do something. Don't just sit on your butt and just be lazy. Just do something. The more you do, the more you'll feel. The feeling comes after the action. That's what my parents tell me all the time. Do something, and then you'll be happy.
Thank you for joining us today, Marshall. We really enjoyed having this interview with you. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we close?
Yes, I would like to say that really coming back to the spiritual in the sense of angels and heavenly music, this place is, I know that I will walk someday and I know that I will be healed in heaven someday, but this place is it's the closest that I've ever come to actually going to heaven, this side of the grave, so thank you very much.
Well, thanks for being with us today, Marshall.
All right. Good evening. Music therapy, clinical depression, and suicide prevention and psychotherapy. What do these things have in common? Hi, we're Marshall Myers and Ben Barger, and let's talk about that. Don't sue us, Rhett and Link.
Hello, everybody. So, Marshall, what would you like to talk about tonight?
I would like to say I have previously had interviews with Jamie George and the George Center, and I have laid out, as well as my book about autism and music therapy, The Vigilante, in several interviews, but I really wanted to come clean and say all that I wanted to say about what the George Center has meant to me, because I don't think anyone quite comprehends the vastness of it.
Okay. Well, where would you like to start?
Well, it all started in about 2012 or 2013. I was in a situation where I was heavily involved in a community center, quote unquote, that was basically where I went for all my socialization, and for years I had felt, ever since I was like 12, I had felt like one of the family there and stuff like that, but things started to change there, and as I started to sell more and more books there, and that was frowned upon by both my parents and the administration there, I began to feel like everything was treading on eggshells and stuff like that. And about that time, I switched to a new medication, and I had started to take Depakote, which causes weight gain. And there were two very gentlemen who I basically had called grandfather, who really in all reality are very nice, but they thought that I was gaining weight because I was eating too much food, and it wasn't because of the drugs, because they didn't know about the drugs. And they would constantly berate me about how fat I was and all that stuff.
I'm sure they weren't really intending to insult, more of a family ha-ha nudge and
yeah, but I'm really very conscientious about that, and also
Sure.
I didn't know it was the drugs. It was really the drugs, and also the surgery that I had caused my stomach to become distended, and I got so conscientious about that, and also. Nikki, of course, we've known Nikki for years, my dog. The main teacher there, during one of his lectures, Nikki barked or nudged someone, and he thought it was funny, but then for the next 7 years, for 3 times, from the head of the room, he would make reference to that, and everybody would laugh, and I felt like I was the laughing stock of the church because it was my fault that had happened. Mm-hmm. And there were only 1 or 2 people that I could talk about, the youth director and the psychologist, that I could talk to about my true feelings. And his wife, even when I would expect her to be a little bit more conscientious of this due to the fact that her daughter is disabled, but she would constantly ask me to move out of the way when I was in the way, and Marshall, can you move? And she would never ask please or thank you. She would demand it like she were the queen, Mm-hmm. And that being said, I should have respected her authority, but it does help when you say please or thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, because of all these faux pas and there not being really a social niche for 20-somethings in the church, I began to really feel like I didn't belong. And not only that, but I was having fights with my caregiver, who he's a great guy now, and now he's patched things up and we have a great relationship. But at the time, he found it kind of like a sociopathic game to get underneath people's skin and stuff like that.
Sure.
And he thought it was fun to see how far he could push people before they would crack, you know.
And
as you know, I have a very low crack level and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. No pun intended, but that being said, I finally was able to let him know how I was feeling, and but then the only place that I felt that I truly belonged was at Camp Twin Lakes, which you just brought me back from.
Yeah.
And very often when I would come back, it would be so heavy getting back into the routine of things that I just want to go back to camp. And also, I was very, this is the time where normally a lot of my friends are getting married and stuff, and it's just that stigma that you can't get married if you have a disability, you know? And basically this, at the time, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but at the time, this girl that I had basically called wife, and that I had basically called the person that I will protect chivalrously, got pregnant out of wedlock and got married. And I felt like...
At what time period was this all happening?
In late 2013. Now, this was just about the time that I found out about the George Center. But I was devastated, and I felt semi-responsible because I was in a state kind of like codependency of that, and I felt responsible for her, and that if I had prayed longer and harder and stuff, that everything would be alright. And also, I had this kind of like this vision, like this movie I'd made in my head, like I would go to her wedding one day and I would have this sword and I would give it to the husband and be like, take care of her for me, you know, like passing on the baton. And she's like, oh no, we're just going down to the courthouse, we're not having a wedding. And it's like, that was the final straw, you know, like.
So to recap, all these things are kind of culminating, and at the time your one escape, so to speak, would be Camp Twin Lakes.
Yeah.
And now this happens.
Yeah, and that all being said, at times I never actually attempted it, but death, I was like, Jesus, please come back or take me now. And I was never actually really truly trying it, but suicide did seem like a viable answer. I mean, not as a viable answer as it would seem to someone like Robert E. Howard, of course, but when I was a kid, I was terrified of going to hell, so, you know. But I went to the Camp Twin Lakes in summer of 2013, and that was the first summer that She Who Will Not Be Named was not there. I decided to stay in for the music time one time, and it was like, Jamie had the most angelic voice, even better than my sister. Don't get me wrong, Macy, I love your voice, but even better than my sister. And like, she has the best voice I have ever heard. And Andrew Littlefield, I know you're up in New York now, but you just killed it on the sax. And they were saying, wouldn't he be great for our Any Dream Will Do performing arts class, because they would respond better to me. And they emailed me about that right when we got back from Disney World, and this was when we got back from our trip that we took you on for my mom's retirement.
Yes.
And they emailed me, and right then I had just learned about the pregnancy thing and the sort of all that, and it was really eating me up. And
so you met Jamie at Camp Twin Lakes?
And then we went to Disney, and then I found out about She Who Will Not Be Named, and then they asked me to, and I was so used to everything being on eggshells at school, quote unquote, that at first I was unsure of everything, but they have behavioral guidelines, but with people with autism and other Down syndrome being very socially challenged in a sense, they are very permissive of certain things, and I was just not afraid to be myself, and for a while after we finally decided to go and think that we would be more useful at someplace else, that was my church. The George Center was my church. It's where I went for fellowship, for getting spiritually fed, and that's what I truly think. I told Tasia Carter to this, but music is the way that God created the world. The whole universe is a song, and I felt a part of that song when I was at the George Center. And later on, I started writing again, because when I'm depressed, I don't write. And like my dad tells me to write when I'm depressed, but it never works out, because my writing is more a reflection of how I enjoy my life rather than writing to make my life enjoyable. So, I could think of no better way to honor my friends for what they did than to write a story about them, and also to write a story featuring characters with autism to serve as the final chapter of my Lamathroth cycle. And all I wanted for months, and even when I was at the George Center, was just vengeance on all those people that had hurt me and had said hurtful things and made me feel bad about faux pas and all that stuff. And if you think about it, Eggleshe, all he wants, even though it's unwarranted, and a lot of my anger was unwarranted, was vengeance upon Lamathroth, who didn't even do anything. His father committed suicide in and of it himself, but he blamed Lamathroth because he just couldn't come to blame himself. And that was me. And a very good mentor friend of mine said that authors' lives are shown in their writing either sympathetically or antithetically, or sometimes both. And this was shown to be me in an exaggerated way. Like, the guy, Eggleshe, his heart is consumed with hate, and all he's out for himself, and he just doesn't matter who he hurts. But then he meets a kind-hearted, magical, beautiful person who basically changes his heart, and that person is basically, now that Shannon's mother had given her up, was basically the mom of Shannon, Bella Jessica, and Jamie worked at Disney and was very good friends, quote unquote, with Belle from the show. Mm-hmm. So hence Bella Jessica, Belle, Jamie. I call Jamie BJ, and and also I've told you this before, but I based the relationship of the Jamie and Shannon off of a very sweet motherly relationship that she had with one of the girls there, and Tasia and Colin and the rest of you, particularly Melissa, if you're watching this, it's Flashlight Go Boom. I can't say the real name, but I just really, in closing, I really want to say thank you. I would not be here on the face of this earth if it was not for you guys. And if ever I want to, Jamie, if I wanted to start a business and do something like that, I would do it just exactly the way you are doing it. I mean, there are things that you said, like you posted that one article about things that you wish you knew when you started your business, but you kill it. You absolutely kill it. Like, you are, apart from my mother, Lucy Cusick, and my, and one or two other relatives I have, beyond any other woman that I've known in my life, you have been the most influential in sort of like a motherly aunt cousin figure to spur me on to become a man of sound mind and a man of pure conviction. And I thank you all. You are all my family. I love you. Thank you, and God bless, and I hope that this encourages you all. Thank you.
have to try so hard. You don't have to get all the way. You just have to get up, get up, get up, get up. You don't have to change a single thing. You don't have to try, 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 try. You don't have to try, 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 try. You don't have to try, 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 try. You don't have to try. You don't have to try.
And I don't have to try to fit in here. I fit in already.